You are 12,000 years old. You have never seen a toothbrush. There is no floss in your world, no fluoride, no dentist, no word for cavity. You chew tough roots and gritty seeds until your molars wear flat, and yet your jaw holds a complete set of teeth, straight, crowded by nothing, with no rot at the gum line. Your great-grandchildren, with all their toothpaste, will not be so lucky. Think about what that sentence actually contains. No brushing, no rinsing, no professional cleaning twice a year, no mouthwash, no whitening strips, no orthodontics. Grit in every meal, sand from grinding stones, bone fragments, fibrous plant matter that would exhaust a modern jaw within a week. Your teeth are worn down like old stair treads, and still, no cavities. Or so few that when archaeologists find them, they note it as unusual. Here's the strange part. It isn't that ancient people had magic teeth. Their enamel was the same enamel you have. Same mineral, same thickness, same genetic instructions. Take one of those 12,000-year-old individuals, raise them on a modern diet, and their mouth would fall apart exactly like everyone else's. The teeth didn't change. The world around the teeth did. And if even one of your ancestors had lost enough molars to stop eating properly before they'd finished raising children, that entire line ends. Yours included. Every person in your ancestry, going back 100,000 generations, kept enough of their mouth working long enough to matter. The real answer here is stranger and less flattering than they ate healthy. It involves an invisible ecosystem living in your mouth right now, one that has been quietly rearranged twice in human history, and one specific bone in your face that has been shrinking for 10,000 years, for reasons that have nothing to do with sugar. We'll get to that bone. Not yet. Start with why this is not trivia. Your mouth is the only place where the inside of your skeleton is exposed directly to the outside world. Nowhere else does bare bone-like tissue sit in open air, bathed in bacteria, taking mechanical abuse 3 times a day for 80 years. In a mammal is the hardest substance your body makes, and it is also the only tissue in your body that cannot repair itself. Break a bone and it knits. Cut your skin and it closes. Lose enamel and it is gone permanently. Whatever damage you accumulate is cumulative and final. That means your teeth are a recording device. They log your diet, your childhood illnesses, your periods of starvation, the water you drank, the region you grew up in. Archaeologists read them the way you'd read tree rings. Enamel hypoplasia, horizontal lines across the tooth surface, marks the exact years a child was malnourished or sick. Isotope ratios in the enamel reveal where they lived when the tooth formed. Nothing else in a skeleton talks this much. So when the teeth of an entire population change, it isn't cosmetic. It is a signal that something fundamental has shifted in how those people lived. And the shift shows up in the archaeological record with brutal clarity. Not gradually, not ambiguously, but as a step change you can see with your naked eye across a museum drawer. Some of those drawers hold jaws with 32 teeth and no visible decay. Others, from the same region a few thousand years later, hold jaws with abscesses, missing molars, and holes you could fit a pencil into. Something happened in between. Let's start with the myth we need to demolish first. The myth is sugar. Specifically, the idea that ancient teeth were healthy because ancient people had no sugar, and that modern teeth rot because we drink soda. It's the explanation everyone reaches for. It feels obviously true, and it is wrong in a way that actually matters. Ancient people had plenty of sugar. Honey was hunted and eaten across Africa, Europe, and Asia for tens of thousands of years. There are rock paintings in Spain, at Cuevas de la Araña, showing a figure climbing to raid a hive, dated to roughly 8,000 years ago. Wild figs, dates, berries, and tubers full of fermentable carbohydrate were dietary staples in many regions. Some hunter-gatherer groups ate seasonally enormous quantities of fruit. And here's the part that should stop you. There are prehistoric populations with heavy plant sugar diets and low decay, and there are others with the same sugars and severe decay. In 2013, a team analyzing skeletons from grotte day pigeons in Morocco, Tafaralt, found something that shouldn't fit the story. These were hunter-gatherers, roughly 15,000 years old, predating agriculture entirely. Their teeth were catastrophic. More than half of the examined teeth showed decay. Almost every adult had cavities. They had been eating enormous quantities of wild acorns and pine nuts, stored and processed, sticky and starchy. So the clean narrative: foragers good, farmers bad, sugar is the villain, collapses on contact with the evidence. Sugar is fuel for the process. It is not the process. The actual villain is not a food. It is an ecosystem. And the food only matters because of what it does to that ecosystem. Right now, in your mouth, there are somewhere around 700 distinct species of bacteria. Not 700 bacteria, 700 kinds. They form structured, layered communities on every surface. Enamel, gum line, tongue, the soft tissue of your cheek. This is your oral microbiome, and it is not an infection. It is an organ you were born to host. Most of those species are harmless or actively useful. They occupy space, consume resources, and secrete compounds that suppress competitors. A crowded, diverse mouth is a stable mouth, because no single species can dominate. This is called competitive exclusion, and it is the same principle that keeps a healthy forest from becoming a single invasive weed. Cavities are what happen when that balance breaks. The primary culprit is Streptococcus mutans, a bacterium with two relevant traits. First, it metabolizes fermentable carbohydrate and excretes lactic acid as waste. Second, and this is the crucial part, it tolerates acid far better than its neighbors do. So when acid levels rise, competitors die back and S. mutans thrives. It creates the conditions that favor itself. The more acid it makes, the more of the mouth it owns. Below a pH of roughly 5.5, enamel begins to demineralize. Calcium and phosphate leach out of the crystal structure into the saliva. Above that threshold, saliva pushes minerals back in. Your teeth are in a constant tug of war between dissolution and repair, every hour of every day, and the winner is decided by how long your mouth spends on the acidic side of that line. That's the mechanism. Acid-tolerant bacteria colonize, diversity collapses, the pH stays low, enamel loses the tug of war. But this explains rot. It does not explain the other thing archaeologists find in ancient jaws, the thing that has nothing to do with bacteria at all, and that no amount of brushing can prevent. That's the shrinking bone I mentioned. It's the more disturbing half of this story, and we'll come back to it. The evidence for the ecosystem collapse is unusually good, because plaque fossilizes. When plaque calcifies, it hardens into dental calculus, tartar, and it traps everything that was living in it. Bacterial DNA, food particles, pollen, even fragments of textile fibers. It survives for tens of thousands of years. In 2013, Christina Adler, Alan Cooper, and colleagues published an analysis in Nature Genetics of calculus from 34 prehistoric northern European skeletons spanning from before farming through to the medieval period and beyond. They found two collapses in oral bacterial diversity, not one. The first came with the Neolithic transition to farming. Cereal grains entered the diet in bulk, and the composition of the oral microbiome shifted toward the cavity-associated species. The second came with the Industrial Revolution, when refined flour and refined sugar became cheap and available to entire populations. After that second shift, the modern mouth appears, dominated by a narrower set of species, with S. mutans firmly established. Adler's team described modern oral microbiota as markedly less diverse than historic populations. The decay rates follow the same shape. Across many regions, transitions from foraging to farming show cavity rates climbing from low single-digit percentages of teeth affected into the double digits. In some early agricultural populations, the rate of individuals with at least one cavity moves from under 10% to over 40%. Taffaralt, the outlier we discussed, sits at over 50% of teeth affected, 51% in the published analysis, 51%. Half the teeth in the sample. Read that number again. And remember, these people had never seen a grain field, never tasted refined sugar, and lived 15,000 years ago. That single site is why the sugar story fails and the ecosystem story survives. Taffaralt didn't have agriculture. It had something functionally equivalent, a concentrated, storable, sticky, high-carbohydrate staple eaten constantly. The microbiome couldn't tell the difference between a stored acorn and a loaf of bread. It responded to the chemistry, not the history. Here's the twist. The thing that looks worst in ancient teeth, the extreme wear, the molars ground down to flat brown discs, sometimes into the dentine beneath, is not damage in the way you'd assume. In many cases, it was protective. Modern teeth retain deep, sharp cusps and narrow fissures on the chewing surface throughout life, because modern food is soft and requires almost no grinding. Those fissures are the single most common site of decay in the modern mouth. They are too narrow for a toothbrush bristle to enter, they trap food, and they are anaerobic pockets where acid producers thrive. It's why sealants exist. The entire purpose of dental sealants is to fill in a landscape that heavy chewing would have worn flat anyway. Ancient wear erased that landscape. A molar worn to a smooth plateau has no fissures to trap anything. It is self-cleaning in a way your molars are not. Grit in the diet, sand from stone grinding, mineral particles in unwashed food acted as an abrasive that polished tooth surfaces during every meal. Unpleasant, also effective. The same logic applies to the wear on the sides of teeth. Heavy chewing produced interproximal wear, grinding down the contact points between neighboring teeth. That created broad, flat, self-cleaning contacts instead of the tight pinched junctions where flossing is now mandatory. So the picture inverts. What looks like a mouth being destroyed by a brutal diet was often a mouth being maintained by one. The wear was the maintenance. Now the loop I opened earlier, was about something that decay rates can't explain. And here it is. Your jaw is too small for your teeth. This is not a metaphor. Malocclusion, misaligned bite, crowded teeth, impacted wisdom teeth, is close to universal in industrialized populations. Depending on the definition used, somewhere between a third and two-thirds of people have malocclusion significant enough to be classified as such. Impacted third molars requiring extraction are routine. Braces are a normal childhood expense. In hunter-gatherer and early agricultural skeletal samples, this is rare. Jaws hold all 32 teeth in alignment. Wisdom teeth erupt and function. Crowding is uncommon enough that its absence is a documented feature of pre-industrial remains. The explanation with the strongest support is mechanical, not genetic. Bone is a responsive tissue. It grows in response to load. This is Wolff's law, the principle that bone remodels according to the forces placed on it. Your jaw is not a fixed structure delivered at birth. It develops through childhood, partly in response to how hard and how often it is used. A child who spends a decade chewing tough, fibrous, dried, and raw foods loads the mandible and maxilla heavily during their growth window. The bone responds by developing to its full potential dimensions. A child raised on soft bread, processed meat, cooked vegetables, and liquid calories does not load that bone the same way. The jaw develops smaller. But tooth size is far more genetically constrained than jaw size. Full-size teeth arrive in an underdeveloped arch. Anthropologist Daniel Lieberman at Harvard has argued this case directly, describing malocclusion as a mismatch disease, a condition arising not from defective genes, but from a body developing in an environment it wasn't shaped for. In experimental work with animals raised on soft versus hard diets, the soft diet groups develop measurably smaller, differently shaped facial bones. None of this is certain. Genetics contributes, population variation is real, and the mechanism is still argued over. But the pattern is hard to dismiss. The crowding appears in the record roughly when food processing intensifies, not when human genes change. The cross-cultural evidence sharpens this further because you can watch it happen inside a single generation. The classic observations come from populations transitioning rapidly to industrialized diets. Groups whose parents grew up on traditional foods and whose children grew up on imported flour, sugar, and canned goods show a decay explosion within one generation. Same genes, same families, different mouths. Studies of Inuit, Aboriginal Australian, and various Pacific and African communities through the 20th century document this pattern repeatedly. Very low decay in the traditional diet cohort, high decay in their own children. That's the cleanest natural experiment available, because it removes genetics as an explanation entirely. The parents and children share ancestry. They do not share a food supply. The behavioral side adds another layer. Ancient people were not passive. Toothpicking is visible in the archaeological record as far back as Neanderthals. Grooves worn between teeth by repeated insertion of a stiff object, documented on specimens from Krapina in Croatia and elsewhere. Chewing sticks made from antibacterial plants. The miswak from Salvador Persica is the best documented example. Appear across Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia going back thousands of years, and modern analyses confirm the plant contains compounds with genuine antimicrobial activity. So they had oral hygiene. It was just made of wood. There's one more number worth sitting with. Frequency matters more than quantity. Each time carbohydrate enters your mouth, pH drops and takes roughly 20 to 40 minutes to recover. Someone eating 3 demarcated meals experiences 3 acid episodes. Someone grazing, coffee, snack, can hold their mouth below the demineralization threshold for most of the waking day. Same total sugar. Completely different outcome. Sit with that. It isn't how much, it's how often. Here's the larger reversal. Ancient humans did not solve this problem. They didn't know it existed. They had no theory of bacteria, no concept of pH, no understanding of bone loading. What they had was a way of life that happened to produce the right conditions as a byproduct. Hard food that built jaws and polished teeth, discrete meals that let saliva recover, and a diverse bacterial ecosystem that never got the chance to be dominated by a single acid-tolerant species. Then, over roughly 10,000 years, and with real acceleration in the last 200, we dismantled every one of those conditions. Not maliciously. We did it while solving other problems. Famine, food spoilage, the sheer labor of chewing. Softer food meant more calories extracted for less effort. Refined flour meant grain that stored without rotting. Constant availability meant children who didn't starve. Those were not mistakes. They were enormous wins. Nobody sensible is arguing we should go back. And none of this is a moral failure on anyone's part. We traded a set of problems we could see for a set we couldn't, and the ones we couldn't see turned out to live in our mouths. The difference is that we now know. They had good teeth by accident. We have dentistry on purpose. Given the choice between an accidental advantage and an understood one, the understood one is worth more. It's just less flattering. So the answer, finally, in plain form, their enamel was not stronger. Their genes were not better. Their diets were not sugar-free. Their mouths held a crowded, competitive ecosystem that never let one acid maker take over. Their food was hard enough to build the bone that held their teeth straight. Their meals had edges, a beginning and an end, so their saliva had time to do its work. Their wear was their cleaning. You brush twice a day because you have to. They didn't, because their whole life was doing it for them. You didn't inherit worse teeth. You inherited a softer world.